Excellent. Okay. We're live on YouTube. It looks like we're all working here. Yay! So this is very exciting. I'm going to have to shut that down, otherwise it's going to keep hearing myself. Okay. This is very new for me, so bear with me as I adjust to this exciting new thing that we are doing at North Van Arts. Hi, my name is Joyelle Brandt, and I'm super excited to be here tonight with three amazing artists to talk about their current exhibition at Cityscape Gallery, which is called Mother Tongue. And I wanted to just quickly share a little preview of what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to play a short video and then we will get into some discussion with these artists.
Our mother tongue is the first language we learn. The sounds we hear, repeat, attach meaning to. Perhaps our first tongue is really our mother's heartbeat, the sound of being surrounded, protected, two bodies synced and inseparable. This unification is where motherhood begins. For centuries, that connection has been the basis for depicting and speaking about motherhood. Mothers are meant to speak love, tenderness, willingness, fulfillment. They are meant to make every effort to maintain the unification of mother and child that existed in the womb. When we become mothers, we replace ourselves with our children in many ways. It is natural to sacrifice oneself for their child, we are told. What if we question this depiction of the simplified bliss of motherhood and willingness to give oneself over to our new role? What if, instead, we address the duality, the multiplicity, the complex range of emotions and practices inherent in the transformation motherhood brings? What would that look like?
So I loved that artist statement that you put together because it spoke so much to my own experiences of motherhood, things that I have thought about. So I'm very excited for this conversation. And I wanted to start with Catherine. And I'm going to pull up one of your images in just a minute so we can show people what we're talking about. But I love that your work contains donated pumps, bottles, nipples, and expired frozen breast milk from other mothers. And I would love to have you speak about why it was important to you to have this community process that you went through where you collected all of this breast milk and all of these remnants, these physical remnants of motherhood. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, the project, it's funny, it started on a really personal note and then it became this community endeavor. It started with my low milk supply and my anxiety surrounding that. And I was pumping constantly. And so the sound of the pump kind of haunted me, and all the parts and the paraphernalia was just, it was overwhelming. And I was having trouble processing it. And I decided, instead of trying to like escape it, I was going to embrace it and amplify it. And so I wanted to surround myself with as many of the objects that were making me anxious as possible. And I reached out to my Facebook moms groups and some friends in person. And I asked for anything they had left over. Because I know our drawers are just full of old bottles and nipples and parts, and the plastic is just endless. And so I wanted to take what I knew other women didn't really want around anymore. And then I wanted to kind of see what I could do with them. I had no idea what I was going to make, but I wanted to have the objects first. And with the milk in particular, that was a really emotional decision to collect that, because I myself really struggled to build up a freezer stash of any kind. Most of my pumping was done in order to boost supply, not necessarily to get a whole bunch of milk. And so when I asked other mothers to give me their expired milk, I didn't really know what response I was going to get, because it's sort of a strange ask. But I was really overwhelmed with the amazing response I got. So many women who had all of this milk left. Almost every single one who gave me milk said, I don't know how long, I don't know why I've been keeping this so long. And it's so weird that I still have this. And oh my gosh, like, please don't think I'm a weirdo for keeping this milk. They all seemed to want to apologize for it because they thought it was an anomaly. They thought it was strange. And it's actually really common. And so once I started collecting stuff, I started talking to these other mothers about their experience and my experience, and comparing notes, and then comparing those notes to the notes that we're all given when we're pregnant. And the notes that we're given when we're pregnant are, it's natural. It'll come easy. Focus on your birth plan, not your nursing plan or your parenting plan. And once I discovered that like other women had experiences like mine and they wanted to share, I really wanted to tap into that and kind of make it bigger than me. So.
And isn't that interesting how motherhood, it's such a universal experience. There's really nothing that has not been done or happened before.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I find so many of us feel so isolated, as if there's this secrecy around what it really means to be a mother. And when people talk to you as you're getting ready to become a mother, I think often you hear like just a lot of platitudes and a lot of jokes about going out to the movies now because you'll never get to go out again. you know but there very much is that universal experience, and it seems so cruel to me that you have that duality of this experience that women have been having for millennia, and still and I think it's probably partly a function of the era that we're living in, this very disconnected culture.
Yes.
That when we are born into motherhood, most of us end up being kind of alone in that.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely the lack of extended family structure that we have, and the old adage of, oh, it takes a village, but we've done everything to decimate our villages. We've made just like everyone has a house and it's their own island, and it's hard for a woman to reach out and say, I'm having trouble breastfeeding, or I hate breastfeeding, or this is more pain than it is benefit.
Yes.
That's an immediate, oh, you're a bad mother.
Yes.
Like, oh, you're complaining about something, which means you're not giving yourself willingly. It's supposed to be willingly. And when it's not, or when it's hard, or when we struggle with that, women are afraid of being judged. They're afraid of having other women and men say, you're not a good enough mother. And what I really think is if we all just shared, there would be so much less judgment, because everyone would know that everyone feels this way on the inside.
Yes. And I know mothers who, some of us are super producers, and they were, bottling up milk and sending it and donating it to hospitals. And then there were others who were not so much. I was definitely not in the super producer mode. And then you've got the moms who can't breastfeed for one reason or another. And the guilt around that. And I know mothers who were driving all over picking up donated breast milk from other people because they felt so guilty that they couldn't provide that. And again, that theme of, it's supposed to be natural. Breastfeeding does not come naturally at all.
Like to a small handful of people.
There are some people for whom that happens, but for most of the women that I know, it's a huge struggle.
And it's one that we don't talk about, and not even afterwards. Women aren't given space. They don't give themselves space to talk about it. They don't give themselves space to process it, and definitely not on any kind of community or societal level. It's trauma. It's the whole thing is trauma that like we all just shove under the rug, I think.
Yes. Isn't that interesting that we don't speak about the trauma?
Mhm.
There's, if you want to clear a room, just, I know this from personal experience because I do work with parents who are survivors of childhood trauma.
Yeah.
You want to clear a room, you start talking about that, suddenly everybody's like, ooh, I got
Yeah.
somewhere to be. You know?
I wanted to take the stuff from women because I felt like by unloading the stuff, I was going to be able to help them unload the stuff they've been holding on to beyond the objects. And in many cases, it worked because when I got these objects, I also got like an outpouring of like a blah, 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 this is my experience. So I think it's been cathartic for a lot of women who have participated.
I bet. Isn't that interesting? The things that we hold on to,
Mhm.
all of the meaning that is imbued in them, and how hard it is to let go.
Mhm.
Every mother knows that when your child grows out of a particular size of clothes and you're packing especially the baby clothes, oh my
Mhm.
God, just waterworks, right? Like all of these objects become so deeply meaningful.
Mhm.
And I think that your work really expresses that
Thank
these are
you.
not just objects in the end. They signify this particular time of life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And moms don't ever forget them. Like I had people come into the gallery over the weekend, my mom's generation, they were like, "Oh, this brings me back." So we carry it forever, I think.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Catherine. I would like to move on to Laura now. And Laura, this particular painting of yours I wanted to show because this is the one that really, I would love you to tell the story. What is happening in this image? Because to me, there's just so much going on here.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, there's not a straight through narrative for this painting, but I think for me, it sort of comes to this ambivalence around the idea of home and sort of related to a lot of the stuff that we've just been talking about. Like home is this idea of sort of comfort and refuge. But then, of course, like that's not the whole story. And I think people can probably relate to this now more because of the pandemic. But I think like as a new mom with like on a nap schedule or, a woman feeling bounded by gendered expectations, all that sort of thing, the idea of home can start to feel very oppressive and limiting.
Mhm.
Um, and just the disconnection as well. We sort of talked about that, but or this idea of like you being sort of an island, sort of disconnected from the outside world and reality. And even with all our little portals, TV screens and phones and things like that, you still feel this, you can't really see what's going on out there.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think just like home also, this sort of, the idea of home in sort of a larger than just the physical space, but like an idea of homeness or I'm at home here, like in a particular community or an ideology. Like there's that sort of sense of home too, where it can be like a comfort and we have this sense of belonging, but then it's also can be very limiting and excluding and all of that sort of thing as well.
Mhm.
Um, so I think for me, like I just trying to bring in some strangeness into my painting, sort of playing with interiors and exteriors, spaces that aren't quite right. They're just sort of a way to play with that tension for me about that sort of ambivalence around home and some of the questions that it brings up. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, because to me, your work really plays on that trope of the idyllic family paintings, a la, Norman Rockwell kind of feeling. And I love how your paintings um, are just really like a little bit disturbing.
Yeah. I mean, I think, um, the Norman Rockwell thing, of course, like makes me cringe a little bit. And I guess maybe that's it, it's like things aren't ever exactly just the way that they seem on the surface, or just sort of the way that we like to present ourselves, maybe to the world. Um, but I think also like the way that I'm thinking about painting is sort of like in response to this narrative in art history too, where like the um, painting is sort of a masculine, solitary, heroic kind of, the man alone in his studio making big important marks on a canvas. So I
Yes.
think, I'm working small and often sort of like working in these spaces of a TV show or a nap or something like that. And they're very calculated and measured,
Mhm.
and then like bringing in repetitive actions like scrubbing and sanding and washing, all of that sort of stuff. Like it's this sort of like doing it over and over again, and there's sort of a futility to it. I feel like lots of that mark making is happening for me in my painting as well. So yeah.
Yes, I love how you touched on that. How, once you become a mother, your time and space, physical space for creativity becomes so limited. And I know that I found after I became a mother that definitely completely changed my creative practice out of necessity. Did you find that for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the beginning I felt like it was sort of impossible to figure out how I was gonna keep
Mhm.
working. And for me it sort of came back by just making it very small and manageable and giving myself these like sort of constraints. So I started off working the little pieces in the show that are like 6x6 and 8x8 panels. Like I was making a lot of these just really small works, sticking with watercolor, sticking with this size, and then I could just sort of go and not feel overwhelmed by all the different aspects. But I could sort of fit it into these small windows of time, and yeah.
Yes. And that's what we do. We do a lot with a little. I find that if you want to get a job done quickly, get a mom to do it because she's learned how to do everything quickly out of necessity. So thank you, Laura. I'd love to move over to Sarah now. And I chose one of your pieces. I'm just going to pull it up on the screen. I'd love you to tell me a little bit about this piece.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me clearly. Um, so basically, the smaller pieces are almost like windows into different times. Literally, like from 1 minute to the next, I feel the day is different with a baby. At one point, you're feeling like, wow, this is amazing. This is just what I'd dreamt of. Babies are awesome. And the next minute, you're just like, can I really do this? What did I get myself into? So with the smaller pieces, they sort of, so they're depicting those moments, the moments where you're feeling like all tapped out and drained and you need that rest, almost like a desert. And then there's spots like this where you're half there, half here. You feel like you have a whole world in you that's sort of slowly starting to unveil itself to you, like you're starting to see the growth that's happening beyond, of course, the times beyond the sleep deprived times, because during my sleep deprivation, I couldn't see any of the growth.
Yeah.
But once that started passing, I could, when you're on the cusp of when you just start sleeping and you start seeing the growth and the sort of the like a secret garden that's sort of been slowly growing while you're taking care of the baby in those first few months where you have no idea what's happening. But you're in some sort of an auto mode and you just keep doing it, and then just at the cusp of when you start sleeping and things start slowly start falling into some kind of a rhythm. For me it took I think for some people it's quicker, maybe for me it took a while. That's I think where this specific piece stands. It's sort of just right on that cusp when you start to see the colors again, or the outside world again.
Yes. Yes. That sleep deprivation. I'm not sure anybody can sufficiently warn you about what that will do
No.
to your psyche. Uh,
No matter how much anybody explains it to you, uh, that is it's just an incredible experience. I can only call it incredible now, but when they say it's used for torture, I understand, because you really for me at least, I think my mom is somebody who is able to do on less sleep. I am not at
Me
all.
hear ya.
So for me, that those first 8 or 9 months were a complete blur, and that's where I think I struggled the most. So I think a lot of my, especially my smaller pieces, or even some of the bigger ones, are thinking about that quite a bit. How things are sort of not as clear, sort of a little, the lines are a little blurred, and then you start, as you go down that whole the smaller pieces, you start to see some clarity.
Right. Yes. I feel like becoming a mother, it's like it takes every preconception of who you thought you were,
Yeah.
and then you just kind of like fall apart at the beginning.
Yes.
And you completely lose any sense of who you are as a person. And then there's this strange other being who is now part of you. And I can remember the first few times I went out after I'd had my first child. I went out by myself into the world, and how raw and vulnerable and terrifying that felt. And like I was missing a limb. Was
Mhm.
uh, like a physical sensation of there's a part of my body that should be here that's not here.
Not here anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, it also I find it really fascinating, even little things like I had always thought I was a really patient person, but
Mhm.
then through this process I realized, no, I'm not all that patient. Or like you're talking about the limb disconnect, like there's this excitement that you're going to be by yourself and on your own, and you won't have to guard this little creature. But then you go out and then you suddenly feel like, I need that little creature now. there's no going back. There's no changing this. So I find it really fascinating how a lot of things that you had never seen of your own self come to light.
Mhm.
Some not very wonderful. And then there's a lot of these other things which make you think. Um, it's a bit cheesy. A lot of these things are so cheesy, but you think, I don't know what I was doing without this creature before. Like it's so you're like, it's so perfect like this. So I find it really fascinating how you swing from one side to the next, and it can happen like 20 times a day.
Oh, absolutely. Uh, I have superimposed my children into memories that happened before they were born.
I
No,
love that.
because it's like it's big, they become so much a part of who you are.
Yes. How
And
you process
I
things.
remember what it was like to not have this person be part of you.
Yes. Sometimes some of my friends are like, don't you, friends who haven't had kids, for example, they'd be like, don't you want to have like a date night, be by yourself with your husband, or, go out. And I'm like, actually, it's really strange. Maybe it's because I just started enjoying this very much. Maybe if you'd asked me last year when I was dying of sleep, I would have said yes, yes.
Mhm.
Although at that point you just want to go and sleep somewhere.
Just wanna sleep.
You don't care about date night. But with her now, it's reached a point where you that cusp where that I've passed that. I'm like, no, I want to do everything with her. So it's it's that same thing. I love that though, that you've like superimposed them pre pre memories.
But I like what you said about like it's so intense, motherhood.
It's
And your life beforehand, it's like seems like your maximum was a 5, and then you have children and like every day is a 10.
every day.
And sometimes it's like an amazing 10, and sometimes it's like, what the hell did I do with my life? And it can go back and forth, like you said, like 20 times in a day.
20 times in a day.
Oh,
It's quite a roller coaster.
it is.
It's a fun one and and a mad one. Like when you go into that tunnel, you're just like, oh, why did I get into this?
Yes.
Definitely.
So I'd like to invite Laura and Catherine now to unmute themselves, and we can talk about these ideas all together. I would love for each of you to tell me what was the biggest surprise about becoming a mother for you. Maybe we'll start with Laura.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think just that it was a 24/7 job. Like I remember in those early days with my first daughter, this panic setting in when I realized that like, this like cycle, this 3-hour cycle of nursing and pumping and rocking and all of this, like it was going to go on all night, every 3 hours. And just like, yeah. And obviously it's not that extreme anymore, but, but it's still like, it's a constant thing that like, even if you're apart from your kids, you're still like, you're worrying about them or you're thinking about planning something or, it doesn't leave your periphery ever. And so I think that for me, the sort of constant nature of it was definitely a very big surprise.
Yes, I hear you on that. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is my life for the rest of my life. I'm never going to get to leave my house.
Never sleeping again.
I'm never sleeping again. I'm never going to be able to, especially for if you're breastfeeding, that sensation of like there's always a clock running to the next breastfeeding session. And so I can remember a friend of mine saying that one day she just lost it. And as soon as her husband got home, she got in the car and she drove and she's like, I don't even know where I'm going. She's driving and driving and driving. But then all she has in her head is that countdown clock. And then you have like the growing pressure in your breasts of the milk filling up and knowing that you have to go back. And that that sense of your home for a while it feels like a prison, because you've lost this freedom that you've had ever since you've been an adult. And then you're just your jailer is a tiny tyrant.
This like dictator to the max.
Yes.
I don't get to vote on anything.
No, exactly. Sorry, what you think and feel does not matter anymore. Catherine, what was your biggest surprise?
I mean, I think along the lines of identity shifting. I was pretty sure I knew who I was. I was 35, 36 when I had my son. Is that right? No, I don't know. I was old enough where I thought, I know what I'm doing. I know who I am. And so it was very surprising to find out that I don't. And that all of a sudden I'm a completely different person than I thought I was. And not only am I different, I don't know what's going to happen next.
Yes.
And I'm sort of a control person. And so the idea that, like, for me, motherhood feels like a never ending exercise in trying to let go.
Yes.
Like they start inside us. There's a cord, the cord gets cut. They move further away from us. They become people with their own opinions and their own wills. And then they just keep getting farther away. And we're here being like, I'll let you go, I'll let you go, I'll let you go. But the whole time knowing that we're completely changed. And so it's like, once they're gone, what's left of me?
Mm,
And so it's this whole,
so much that, yes.
it's real identity shifting. It's like, I have a part in my my artist statement. I don't know exactly what it says, but it says something like, when you become a mother, you disappear and then you reappear as a different person at some point. But there's this period in between where you're like just this mashup of you and your kid and your daily struggles, and you're just trying to survive. And that's your identity for like a long time, is survival.
Yes.
So that was surprising to me. I was not aware of that.
Absolutely. I did a collage piece, and I think my son was probably around 1 at the time, and I took a picture of myself cuddling him on the couch, and I cut it up and I put it all back together and stitched it together into the form of a mother holding her baby.
Mm.
And, you know, pieces of our bodies were sort of all over the place, because that was how I felt. Like
Mhm.
nothing was recognizable anymore.
Mhm.
And everything felt just so, like, it's so raw. Life feels so intense, and
Mhm.
especially in that first year of motherhood. I just feel like it just takes your skin and peels it back, and you're just exposed to the world. You feel everything.
Yes. It's raw.
So Sarah, what was your biggest surprise?
So I think it's similar to I think Laura also mentioned. I mean, it's the same lines. The isolation I felt. I knew that it was supposed to be difficult, and I'm somebody who also thinks of the worst case scenario and all of that stuff. But I did not understand the extreme to how isolated you feel, and I think it came from a slight, like I also came from a place of I have a village back home in Pakistan,
Mhm.
and now I'm here, and I don't have a village. So I think I guess you get a little angry as well when you're feeling all those emotions. Um, and as I started to, obviously there's friends who tell you how to deal with a lot of stuff, and a lot of my friends helped that way. And I found baby classes and I went to them, and it helped tremendously to know there are other people who are, you know, drowning in all of this. It was a game changer, and slowly I built my own village, so to speak, here. I have a lot of friends, but a lot of them were not in the same stages, and that also makes a difference. So as I found, also I find it all I want to do is paint and draw all the time. And when I couldn't, it just drove me completely nuts. That's how I process things. And so for a little while, I had to stick to pencil and paper. That helped. I started doing these diaries every day, jotting down a little bit of something I'd seen my daughter do, or the nap she took, or whatever. It was only 20 minutes and I was frustrated or whatever. So that kind of stuff helped. But the initial isolation where you just, I don't know, it's the same thing. I think when you haven't figured out when you haven't processed it yourself, you also don't know what to speak about. There's the guilt as well, and you don't know how to explain to the people around you what you're feeling. And sometimes when you do, they're so past that stage, they have grown up kids and have gone through so much more that seems like a really small, tiny thing that they can't even wrap their heads around, being much of a problem, sleep deprivation. But strangely, it was that. And then the other extreme was I never knew they were so ridiculous and they were so funny.
Yeah.
I had never imagined that they were like, I couldn't. I've often found myself, if I'm in a broody place, or if I'm feeling a little low, I can only be in that place for like 3 minutes. Because after 3 minutes, she'll do something so ridiculous, I can't help laughing.
Mm,
That's another thing nobody could have prepared me for or explained, no matter how funny toddlers are. I
mhm.
couldn't see that till it happened.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because you get to see, like they figure out how to make us laugh so early,
So quickly, yes.
right? And there's an evolutionary biological reason for that, of course.
Yeah. Exactly.
How to make my mom not go crazy.
Exactly.
Why they're so cute.
That's why they're so cute.
Yes. And I can recall one day I went to the deli and a woman looked over into the stroller and commented about how cute my son was. And I said back, yeah, that's so you don't throw them out a window in the middle of the night.
Exactly.
And then immediately felt horrified that I'd said that in front of
But it's so true. Yeah. I think Laura and I spoke about this recently, how they're just, they have to be cute. That baby stage is the most difficult. And I'm glad it happens that way, because after that,
You haven't
everything
reached
seems like.
4-year-olds yet. But that's also the thing I hate. I just
I
did
shouldn't
something I
speak too
hate.
soon.
Because the age you're at is intense. Like at every stage you're at with your kid, you're like, this is the most intense. And you're so focused on it that you don't even remember the last time it was intense or how it was intense as a baby, because now it's intense as a toddler. And then it's intense with, elementary school social stuff, which is intense in a whole different way.
I
And
can
then it's
imagine.
middle school social stuff. And there's always a stage. And when people are in a different stage, they'll be like, oh, you haven't seen anything yet. And you're like, when does it,
To be honest though, I had so far, touch wood, for me, the baby stage was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're so cute and then they're tyrants. I mean, what is that? That is a very deadly combination.
It's kind of like doing a lot of psychedelic drugs.
Yes,
That's what
exactly.
It's like. A parent to a small human.
Exactly. So for me, so after that, everything feels like, oh, this is I can handle this, I think.
Did you, because I know it definitely surprised me. I did not know I could even keep functioning at all on that little sleep. And definitely that process gave me a new respect for my body and how much it can be put through and still surprisingly survive.
Yeah. I feel like that is also somewhere I wish I knew to take care of myself a little better, because if you're not sleeping, you should at least try to eat. Like if you stop everything, I don't think I touched my prenatals the minute Marzia was born. Stuff like that, because I was so overwhelmed. I just didn't have the time to think of stuff like that. I think it's best you try to stick to some one healthy thing. If you can't do like sleep, try to eat. Because I didn't do any of it, I felt like by the 8th month, I just couldn't sleep even when I could, even when it was time to sleep, or even when she was sleeping. So I think, it's crazy what your body and your mind can do. And that's why we have the second one, because we're like, okay, it passes. I have done it, so I will be able to do it.
Yes. And I can recall getting to the point where I couldn't sleep because of the anxiety, because I was, you're so attuned at that point. You're just waiting for any little sound. So any little sound in the house that I heard would wake me back up. And that was a surprise. Also, I did not know how many times a day I would imagine my baby dying horrifically in some accident. This is
intrusive thoughts. It's terrifying.
People don't tell you about the intrusive thoughts, that you are going to imagine a lot of really horrible stuff happening to your child. And I can remember I had terrible postpartum depression with my second child, but I didn't have that. I feel like my brain had worked out every possible scenario with my first son, so that by the time I had my second child, it was like, I'd only get the occasional one of those. That's another one I wish people would like warn you about in advance, because
Yeah.
it's really terrifying.
It's really terrifying. Yeah, definitely. And the sleep thing, when they wake you up, if they move, the movement, the sound, if you're woken up 4 times in the first hour of your sleep, you just after that you just can't sleep. You've
No.
had too many power naps in that 1 hour. So
Mhm.
it's really crazy. Yeah.
Or you get woken up in that part of your sleep cycle that's like the worst part, and so you just feel like you're going to throw up as you're trying to walk down the hall to your child. Laura, can you tell us a little bit about any stories of motherhood that you had ingested so prior to becoming a mother? It could be from your family or community or from popular media. Like, were there any ideas about motherhood that you had that either were or were not confirmed when you actually became a mother?
Yeah, I mean, I think the context that I sort of grew up in was a pretty traditional one. Like my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I think like my aunts and grandmas and all of that as well. They're the primary caregivers for the children, and they did sort of all the emotional labor and the domestic stuff. So yeah, like I don't know. I don't think I ever made a conscious decision to take on those roles, but I think it's kind of interesting how some of that stuff just gets like imprinted on you as well. And so I think it surprised me, like once I had kids, that I was like doing all of these things. Like like just sort of unconsciously or without question, and then feeling kind of like weighed down by it as well. It was just sort of this, thing that I took on. Yeah. But I think that maybe that is something that, there's, parenting kind of happens differently, I think, today, where like, both maybe if there's a man and woman, like both people sort of can take part in that parenting, or, all different kinds of contexts. But I think there's still a way in which like many women still just take on a lot of that sort of that labor that is, some of it's visible, like making supper or something, but a lot of it is it's emotional labor, I think. And it's sort of like the thinking stuff. It's the sort of like worrying about the rashes, or like making the appointments, or like making sure
Mental
to eat the broccoli or something, like you just like all the stuff that I think that I worried about is maybe not something that my partner would think that much about at all or worry about. So yeah, I think that's just sort of part of that inheritance of seeing a certain pattern of, caregiving, which, I'm grateful that I was cared for very well, but yeah.
Yes. There's so much of that unacknowledged emotional labor that you talked about. And one aspect of that I really think about is the level of attunement that the primary caregiver has to the child, that level of constant, are they thirsty? Have, just all those little, like all throughout the day, your brain is so full of these thoughts of just constant. And I just went for a walk this afternoon with one of my mom friends, and we were talking about how, when you have young kids, I don't know if you had this, but I had a lot of people come up to me and be just treasure every moment. I kind of wanted to punch them in the face, because you can't be in that moment. You're already, as a mom, thinking 3 steps ahead about how you're going to get the kid to go down for a nap, and you got to make sure that you wipe down the stroller, and like your brain is so full, and it's so hard to actually be present in the moment with your child. Those moments when you actually do get to be present with your child are beautiful and precious, because there's so few of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think on top of that too, there's maybe more like this sort of pressure just to sort of do all the things right, and so like that constant like monologue is sort of like, is the food choices right, like am I doing the right sort of sleep thing, and I like doing breastfeeding or like all the stuff, right? And sort of the internet is full of all these things. We're like, am I doing this right? And so you're just constantly worried about everything. Yeah.
I think I found that that constant kind of, my kid is in my head all the time. In terms of making art, like that's a really difficult place to be in, because when somebody else is kind of living in your head, you have less headspace for everything else, first of all. But there's also just, there's not as much creative energy. There's not as much just space to process and do your own thing. And so I think a lot of times mother artists are having to choose. They're having to say, like, where does my creative energy go? Is it going to go to the kid? Is it going to go towards making my own work? And for so long, we've been taught to feel guilty if we choose to use it on our work. And I think, you know, all women who go back to work face that kind of like internal guilt on some level, or most women, many women, I don't know. But for artists in particular, I think it can be even harder because it's a self-driven career that you're making like a choice to do. And a lot of people can see it as like, oh, well, just, you know, make your art and parent and bring your baby to the studio. And it's like, that's not how this works. Literally not how this works. You know, maybe when they're in a play band, but I can't bring my, anyway. So I feel like a lot of this, like what you're talking about, of like just being consumed with the mental load of parenting, it made me make work about it because I didn't have any mental space for any other topics. It was just like, I have to start making work about this experience because this is all I'm getting right now. This is like, all I'm getting is like, you know, to be an artist, you have to take things in and then you jumble them up and then you put them out into the world. You're responding to something. Like that's what art is. It's like, it's a response. And if you're only kind of responding in your own head, sometimes that's problematic. So if you're, you know, you need something bigger than yourself, I think a lot of times to kind of build a good body of work. Yeah. And if your kid is all you're getting, like if that's all you're intaking, then that's all you can output also. So I just think it's interesting to kind of think about it in terms of like making work and the work that we all have in the show and kind of juggling, I don't know, the creative process and parenting is just, it's very difficult.
It definitely is. I can say that my kids are 8 and 13 now. It gets a lot easier. It's fantastic having a 13-year-old who can babysit now.
Mm-hmm.
And you do start to get that freedom back. And then in my experience, it takes a long time to recover from what I call the time deficit of early motherhood, when you have so little time for yourself. And when you finally do get a little bit of time for yourself, often what happens is you can't even decide what to do with it because there's so many things that you would love. Do I take a nap? Do I have a shower? Do I feed myself? Do I make some art? Do I do the laundry? Like, these are all, you know, and it took me years to get to the point where I wasn't constantly feeling rushed every time I had like a free moment, like, oh, I better cram everything I can into this moment because I don't know when I get the next one. So it's interesting how that it totally shifts the way you think about everything in your life.
It makes you very efficient.
It does. It definitely does. Yeah.
Especially like working during nap times, trying to squeeze in like whatever you can, or preschool hours, or just, yeah, trying to get it in small snippets everywhere.
Yeah.
And then you think, oh my gosh, my kid's going to school now. I'm going to have so much time. And then you find out how fast 5 hours goes by and you have to go back out the door to pick them up.
Oh, don't say that.
Yeah, Laura, you're looking forward to that time, right?
Oh, that time should be celebrated for all parents who are at home with their kids full time. That day when you first have that first day of kindergarten, after, you know, the graduate entry stuff, you know, like the first actual full day of school, I think
Yeah.
every mom should get like a celebration for that day.
Mhm.
It's like, you've made it.
I say the same about first birthdays. Like I used to like on like the groups that I'd be in, it was like, what should we do? What should we get our baby for the first birthday? It's like nothing. You gave them a year. You gave them your entire self for a year. That is their gift. What are you going to get yourself now? Because you deserve something for that first birthday.
Definitely.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Well, our time is coming to an end. This has just flown by, and I just thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation to have, especially today, celebrating International Women's Day, to just have these frank and honest conversations about motherhood is so good for the soul. I would like to add in that if anybody who is watching is struggling with postpartum depression, please be smarter than I was and reach out for help. There is the Pacific Postpartum Society in Vancouver. They have a free line that you can call or text and just talk to somebody about it. Postpartum depression is no joke. Take care of yourself. And for all the moms out there who struggle with that mom guilt, when you do try to take care of yourself, you need to do that. And it is imperative that you do that, because if you don't, you really just end up a big empty husk, and that does nobody, including your child, any good. So I hope that people will come down to our gallery at Cityscape on Lonsdale and come see Mother Tongue. It's such a fantastic show. I'm really enjoying every day when I get to go in the office. I get to go out and look at it. I feel very lucky that I get to do that. So thank you all for putting this show together. This is such an important topic. I'm so grateful that we get to have these kind of conversations.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much, Shreya.
Thank
Joelle.
you. I enjoyed that so much.
Wonderful. So everybody, you can swing by northvanarts.ca for all the information about this show and other events that we have coming up. Thanks for tuning in to my very first streamed live on YouTube. It was very exciting for me. And hopefully it's the beginning of more conversations like this. Happy International Women's Day, everyone.